what actually got you into Linux? Like, because you started way earlier than I did.
Yeah, so I would have been 15, I think, getting close to 16. And my granddad, who passed away recently, bought me my very first actual computer that was my own. And it didn't have Windows on it. So he went on a website called eBuyer, which probably a lot of people know. And for some reason, they were selling desktops with, at the time it was Mandrake, a Linux distribution called Mandrake, which then eventually became Mandriva, and I don't even know if it's around anymore. But like, I loaded it up, and I was like, "What the hell is this? Like, what? Nothing I want works on it. What is this? What is Linux?" And it just I went from there, because I wasn't always like attached to Windows anyway growing up, because I grew up with stuff like the Amiga, Acorn, and loads of other different types of systems. So I already knew that different types of systems existed. And because it was now on a computer that I owned, that was mine, I started messing around with it, seeing what it could do. And like every year or so, I would go back and maybe install a different distribution, until I think Ubuntu came along, which is why Canonical and Ubuntu always do hold a special place in my heart. And I'm sure it is the same for a lot of people. When the first few versions of Ubuntu came out, they were making things easier than basically any other distribution at the time. And from there, I just tried sticking with it, really. I always sort of had Ubuntu, I think, on a dual boot from then for basically ever, almost, really. So, yeah.
Well,
that's kind of the story in a nutshell there, really, I think.
So what was your... I presume you're 15-year-old, probably gaming. What was your... I presume you weren't trying to game on that system yet, or maybe you were trying out some of the open source games. What were you doing back then? What was your plan?
There was stuff like Frozen Bubble and stuff like that, little open source games which I was trying out. But I was also like learning PHP, web coding and all that anyway. So I started trying to do a little bit of that on there. And it's funny, really, how much trust and faith you put in other people online when you're a lot younger. So back when Fedora was originally called Fedora Core, and it was Fedora Core 1, then Fedora Core 2. This is going back, a long time ago now. I didn't really know how to set it all up. So at one point, I had downloaded Fedora Core, it must have been 2 or 3, possibly. I managed to install it, but I didn't really know how to set anything up. But someone online was like, I'll log into your system remotely and I'll set it up all for you. And I was like, maybe 16, 17 at the time, maybe. And I was like, okay. And so I just watched them on my computer doing all this stuff. And you look back at it and you think, that was a really bad idea. They could have done anything on it.
Yeah, I've got plenty of my own stories about doing stupid things as a kid. A lot of them involved being dumb on RuneScape. I fell for a lot of scams. There's a reason why I have a distrust of grifters online. RuneScape is a big part of that. Well, so from there, at some point you started gaming on Linux, like the website, not Linux Gaming. When did that happen?
So I followed maybe 2 or 3 other Linux gaming sites at the time. And one of them was linuxgames.com, and I started contributing to that one a little bit here and there. And just really, I was looking at all these sites and I thought I could do better. Like, none of them were really updated very often, and there wasn't much to them even when they were updated. And I really just genuinely looked at them and thought, I could probably do better. Like, I know how to make websites. And so that was it. That was literally the reason. I saw a few others not really doing anything, and I thought, well, I'm going to do it better. And to this day, 12, 13 years later, I'm here and none of them are.
Yeah,
So
that I think that says a lot. Like you've put out like how many articles do you? Okay, I was gonna say how many articles you put out a week, and I see you put out like what's not.
well,
How many did you put out today?
today I think about 7.
Okay.
Well, like since the 1st of July until say yesterday, I've done 198.
Okay.
But then
Jesus.
that's on top of quite a lot of videos on the YouTube channel as well. So, but I mean, it sounds like a lot,
It
but
does.
a lot of it is just general news tips. So it's not like I'm reviewing heavily, in depth a lot of games and hardware and so on.
Sure.
A lot of what Gaming Linux is just keeping people up to date in a central location of news tips, of news and new games coming out and so on, rather than people following. So I follow probably about 400 RSS feeds and loads of things on top of that to gather all the news together. And like we're so established now that developers and publishers come to me to tell me the things, so then I put it out to everyone else.